The standard of living of all Americans can be traced back to here, the vast oil-rich deserts of Saudi Arabia.
Our house is your house.
There's an Arab saying, the sands are blowing. And I submit to you, King Fahd, that if the sands of time give us any hint of the future, it is that in the days ahead, the friendship between the Saudi Arabian and American people will be a strong and vital force in the world.
Now, after the dollar got off the gold standard, it became the super petrodollar, and it replaced gold by what some people like to call black gold, aka oil. Now, how this happened is one of the most interesting stories that has ever happened throughout history.
The petrodollar is actually a device invented by Kissinger and Nixon.
U.S. President Richard Nixon sent his Secretary of State and National Security Advisor, Henry Kissinger, to Saudi Arabia for a secret meeting.
That meeting took place on a battleship called the USS Quincy, and very few records were kept of that meeting. But Roosevelt promised the King of Saudi Arabia weapons and protection in exchange for the United States to have the exclusive right to develop oil from Saudi Arabia using dollars. Meaning, if countries wanted to trade the most important commodity of all, oil, they needed to get their hands on dollars. And from that point on, oil would be priced in USD. And if a country tried to get their hands on oil without using dollars, that country historically needed more freedom in their lives. And it's this arrangement between the US and Saudi Arabia that helps the US with dominance over global trade and helping preserve the US dollar as the world's reserve currency for over 75 years now. But just this Sunday, the Prince of Saudi Arabia announced that he would not renew this contract. And this decision is part of a much bigger trend where countries are ditching dollars in international trade and oil transactions.
The dollar. Looks like they're dumping it.
The world's largest oil producer, Saudi Arabia, is reportedly asking to join BRICS.
As more and more developing nations, including some of the world's largest economies, decide to ditch the dollar in their bilateral trade, voices of concern and even despair are being heard in the US over the looming end of America's global financial dominance.
But the question is, what does all of this actually mean? Ask yourself this question. What is the US famous for exporting that the world is buying? I'll give you some examples. China is famous for being the world's factory. It makes and exports everything. Germany is known for its engineering and high-quality manufacturing. BMW, Porsche, Mercedes. Japan is a major exporter of electronics, cars, Toyota, Honda, and the best anime in the world. South Korea, famous for semiconductors, smartphones, Samsung, Hyundai, Kia, and some of the best skincare products in the world. Saudi Arabia, famous for its oil. It's one of the biggest exporters of crude oil in the world. Russia, famous for its natural resources, its gas, its oil, its coal, its other minerals. Brazil is known for its agriculture, one of the biggest exporters of soybeans, coffee, sugar, and beef. India is a major exporter of software services, tech, and pharmaceuticals. Australia is also rich in natural resources. It's the leading exporter of iron ore, coal, natural gas, and black opal. Canada is also a huge exporter of natural resources, including timber, minerals, and some of the nicest people I've ever met. France is arguably the biggest exporter of luxury goods and fashion in the entire world. Italy is also known for fashion and luxury. Ferrari, Lamborghini, wine, pasta. The Netherlands, famous for happiness, flowers, dairy products, vegetables, height. Switzerland, famous for financial services. It's the world's biggest bank. Pharmaceuticals, Rolex. The United States, famous for the Kardashians. Hollywood. Now, there's actually a lot of things the US produces that the world consumes, including culture, but also tech. We've made the biggest companies in the world. We export the biggest military in the world, but arguably the biggest export that the United States has by far are US dollars. We aid a lot of countries with a lot of money. By design, we are the world's biggest money exports. So the question is, how does being able to export dollars help the US economy? And the answer is, it helps in every single way imaginable. Because having the petrodollar system has created a demand around the world for other countries to buy our dollars and our treasury bonds, because that's how the US fuels its growth, by issuing this debt, these treasury bonds that other people buy. It's also created a stable economy, lower interest rates, and liquidity in financial markets. And this has been hugely beneficial for the US stock market through higher stock prices and investment flows. Without the ability to export dollars, that would mean bad things. Let me show you an analogy using a balloon, because this is the US economy in its normal state. And whenever there's a problem, we can just pump the balloon full of money to solve the problem, which also creates inflation, and it looks like this. Now, if I pump this balloon with enough inflation, eventually those rising prices would cause the economy to break because consumers wouldn't be able to afford anything. So eventually, with enough air, with enough money, the economy would break. Now, lucky for us, we have an exit valve right here. That means we can release the pressure and the dollars to the rest of the world, and the world would actually absorb it because it also needs those dollars to buy its energy. But what happens when you have a balloon that keeps on expanding and doesn't have an exit valve?